Amazing.
Beautiful.
All around the country and around the world. Thanks for joining, y'all.
So today we're going to talk about the explosion of hyperscale data centers in the Southwest, the harms associated with them, and what's being done to stop them. We want to understand why these corporate giants and their friends in government are greenlighting these projects with virtually no public vetting and at an alarmingly rapid rate. We've invited a panel of organizers who are going to help us deepen our understanding on the implications of this expansion in the Southwest and how it's connected to a longer history of environmental racism, political disenfranchisement, and corporate government collusion. And I also wanted to give you a heads up that after the panelists, we're going to have a very special announcement that you're not going to want to miss.
Okay, so let's get started. On the second day of his new term in office, President Trump held a press conference to announce a new venture called Project Stargate. And that's, yes, the real name. Surrounded by three of the four principal investors, Sam Altman of OpenAI, Larry Ellison of Oracle, Masayoshi Son of SoftBank. Other players include an investment fund owned by the government of Abu Dhabi and tech partners NVIDIA, Microsoft, and ARM. The venture laid out over $500 billion investment to build 20 data center campuses across the United States over the next 4 years. Just to get a sense of the scale of these projects, each campus alone would consume more power than the entire city of San Francisco and could take up as much land as roughly 70 football fields.
So, OpenAI released a statement touting this project as, quote, infrastructure that will secure American leadership in AI, create hundreds of thousands of American jobs, and generate massive economic benefit for the entire world. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes, it is. And since that announcement, the Trump administration has gone all the way in on the AI race by destroying regulatory bodies like the Environmental Protection Agency, reversing Biden's executive order aimed to regulate AI risk. He has eroded the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ability to monitor nuclear reactors and has even backed out of the endangerment finding that concluded that greenhouse gases are indeed a public health threat, just to name a few.
Yeah, and in July, folks may remember that that's when the Trump administration released the AI Action Plan. And just a couple days ago, he is threatening to sign again this executive order that would ban AI regulation by the states. And so, this AI Action Plan, they want to frame this push for AI as a win or lose race. They want us to believe that this massive build out is both necessary and unavoidable. And as we've previously covered in webinars and other conversations, behind this is just the latest and possibly most ambitious attempt to consolidate power and wealth amongst a government and tech oligarchy.
Data centers are the critical computing infrastructure that these oligarchs are literally banking on to develop generative AI. The growth of these hyperscale data centers raise serious concerns about the threats they pose to our communities.
Yeah, like tech companies like our friend there, Peter Thiel's Palantir, not our friend, our
Mm-mm.
enemy, and Palmer Luckey's Anduril are getting billions of dollars in government contracts for AI surveillance technology. And that is being used to track down, detain, and deport migrants. It's being weaponized against abortion providers, against the trans community, and against protesters. There are massive repositories for surveillance and centralizing and storing government and corporate data without our consent.
In MJ's recent report, The People Say No, Resisting Data Centers in the South, we highlighted how the spread of data centers in the South continues a playbook of political disenfranchisement, environmental racism, and extraction from Black, poor, and working class communities.
Yeah, and the term is sacrifice zones. That's what's used to refer to that extraction of wealth from and created by these communities. And it's a history that we're also seeing replayed in the Southwest, whose reliance on the oil and fossil fuel industries have left many struggling with very similar consequences.
Mhm. And like the Southwestern states are bending over backwards to attract the industry, creating lucrative tax breaks, crafting legislation that is helping to clear the path for massive energy and water grabs. The Southwest has been witnessing massive data center development from the likes of Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, alongside tech giants like Oracle and NVIDIA. These buildouts haven't gone unnoticed, though. There has been tremendous organizing, some of which you'll hear from later on tonight.
Yeah, definitely. So the climate in the Southwest, it varies depending on elevation, but it's primarily hot and dry. And
Mhm.
the Southwest is expected to get even hotter and drier as climate change brought on by fossil fuel emissions accelerates our drought conditions.
Mhm. And the region has been experiencing a historic mega drought. The loss of groundwater has meant reductions to farming and communities needing to literally limit their water consumption. Average temperatures in the Southwest have increased in the last 20 years, with some areas more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than average.
And on top of that, the industries that have historically set up shop in the Southwest, I'm talking about the petroleum industry, coal mines, nuclear power plants, they've all had their share of negative impacts there. So these developers of these data centers, they're drawn to the business-friendly atmosphere, the strong atmosphere of deregulation, existing pipelines, and of course, compromised local politicians.
hmm And we also need to look at the presence of the U.S. military industrial complex in the Southwest. From creating and detonating the first atomic bomb for the Manhattan Project in New Mexico to being the home of many major defense contractors such as Raytheon, the U.S. military has long used the Southwest to build and test war technologies and dump toxins into the land and water supply.
Yep. And the resulting environmental fallout includes depleted uranium sites, nuclear waste, and a host of other pollutants that account for high rates of cancer and other diseases. And just for an example, there's the Raytheon plant in Tucson, Arizona, which was found to have been polluting the groundwater to such an extent that the EPA designated it a Superfund site. And Raytheon, as we know, receives massive amounts of government funding to build war technologies.
hmm Part of how the gas and oil, military, and now tech industries have gotten away with these harms is by promoting a narrative of the Southwest desert landscape as unused land. This narrative plays on the false premise that deserts are devoid of life, that the land is barren, while erasing the incredible biodiversity of the region, as well as the indigenous communities that have lived and continue to be on and of that land.
Yeah. And like OpenAI's Project Stargate, real name, these data centers are part of a larger wealth and resource extraction project, a coordinated land and data grab facilitated by local politicians and corporations counting on our lack of political and economic power to stop them.
hmm But this is only part of the story, y'all. Organizing has emerged all across the United States. Communities are pushing back on big tech's ability to build the infrastructure they require to take more and more from us. We will now turn to local organizers from Amarillo, Texas, Tucson, Arizona, Las Cruces, New Mexico, to learn more about how Southwest communities are organizing against these projects and how we can support these fights. After we hear from our speakers, we will turn to your questions. Please add your questions and comments in the actual Q&A box. You can put them in the chat, but we just prefer the Q&A box because it's just a little bit easier to track. We will have staff from MJ looking at the chat to get your questions answered.
All right. So we're going to start with Vivek. We want to talk to you about what's happening in Tucson, Arizona. And I know you're part of the No Desert Data Center Coalition, and you've been organizing there to stop the Project Blue data center. And it's a development plan by Beale Infrastructure. Just last week, I believe, Amazon Web Services pulled out as the end user. And I think Meta might have pulled out as well. You can tell us. But they're moving forward. And despite all the successes that you have had organizing there, the developer Beale is still insisting on moving forward with this project, and recently got a deal approved to acquire energy through the Tucson Electric Power. So, they've announced that they'll no longer need Tucson's water because they're moving forward with what they're calling a closed loop system. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about that. Like, how does this closed loop alternative continue to pose dangers to Tucson and Arizona? And also, what kind of interventions are you considering now within different levels of government?
Yeah, cool project, right? Like we kicked out Amazon and then they went to Meta
Mm.
and then Meta's like, no thanks, there's too much community opposition. And now they're just going ahead and what they're going to do, build like an empty data center. They're super confident they'll find a customer, but we don't know who that could possibly be at this point. Um, So thanks for your question. Thanks for having me here. This is my first webinar, so it's a little weird not to see participants. So I'm gonna get through this. But they went from the first initial proposition for this data center was for it to be water cooled, and they had this whole plan to build 18 miles of pipeline to use reclaimed water from the city of Tucson. Now, thankfully for us, Tucson Water is a public utility, which meant that when it came to approving the process of having this water-cooled center, even though the county board of supervisors, the majority of them failed us and sold the land, Tucson Water, being a public utility, meant that Tucson City Council had to approve. So we had about 7 weeks between when the land was sold and when City Council voted to organize our community and get folks out. And we did, and we won, right? City Council and the mayor voted unanimously to not to annex the land. And that was a huge victory. That's the one you all heard about. A few weeks later, TEP, our electric utility, entered into a deal with Beal Infrastructure, the developer, and they came back with a plan that is entirely air-cooled, so not water-cooled. Now, the reason that this can proceed is that our electric utility is a private company. It's not a public utility, which thankfully our Tucson DSA chapter is trying to do something about with a public power campaign. So follow that if you're in the area. We're trying to get Tucson Electric Power to be a public utility. So that went to the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is very corporate friendly, and unfortunately, they did vote last week to approve that deal. And so we're still leaning on our Board of Supervisors. There's some technicalities in the land deal that we don't think is valid, even though they're going ahead with it anyway. So we're hoping to turn them around on that. Um, because air cooling doesn't actually solve the water problem either, right? Most of TEP's energy comes from fracked gas. And so fracking gas means that's someone else's community they're destroying somewhere else, shipping that gas here where it actually takes more water to evaporate and generate steam to power those turbines. So, we're not talking about we're still talking about like a huge reliance on fossil fuels and generating energy from those fossil fuels requires water. But the bigger picture here is that we still haven't heard any compelling arguments, as you said earlier, for like why this proliferation of hyperscale data centers is actually necessary and what social good they provide us, right? Um, we know that we've had data centers for decades. We've been using them to use the internet and post our cat videos, and it's been fine, right? Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the proliferation of these huge community and environment destroying hyperscale data centers. And, I wish I had like a smoking gun and direct evidence, but like the only other thing that's growing is is generative AI, right? The fossil fuel industry that's going to power these data centers, and the cruelty industry in the form of genocide, surveillance, imprisonment, detention, deportation. Companies like Flock, like Palantir are getting these huge government contracts, and they're the ones who are growing. So, and there are so many data centers now that they need to find creative new ways to be cruel. Like the Arizona prison system is considering not allowing incarcerated people to receive direct physical mail. They're considering a plan to ship this to Texas where it'll be scanned and then the digital files will be sent over to incarcerated folks to access on their tablets, which they have to purchase. So, yeah, I mean, if we don't want to be destroying the world, we just need to be generating and consuming less energy, and that is what we're failing to do with this new industry. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Shane.
you. Sorry, Teresa, did I cut you off?
Now go ahead.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you for connecting the dots there, too, between data centers and surveillance and all of the other fights that many of us are engaged in. Um, so in Amarillo, Texas, a coalition has formed to stop the construction of what purports to be the world's largest AI data center and energy complex, nearly 6,000 acres, y'all. Rick Perry, former U.S. Energy Secretary and former Texas governor, and his son are the main investors behind this project called Project Matador. The president, the President Donald J. Trump Advanced Energy and Intelligence Campus. And yes, that is the real name. This project could use nearly 49 billion, y'all, gallons of water. Kendra, as we know, this can only move forward with support from local officials. So I'm curious, can you share a little bit more about what's been happening locally in your community? What happened at the Carson County and Amarillo City Council levels? And then I have a two-parter question, which is that we also know you requested a hearing with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Curious how that went.
Well, lots to tell you, lots of
Yes,
updates. And I would like to sidebar, it's really fun how we have to keep saying, yes, it's really called that because it is very much like elementary boys were left in charge of naming all of the things.
that's right.
Where we are with Fermi America's The Matador Project is our most recent meeting, which was the TCEQ meeting, the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality. Fermi had requested for 3 air permits. One was greenhouse gas, and the other 2 are related to all the emissions and pollutants that are harmful to humans that would be released from that first gigawatt power from the natural gas plants that they're planning to build to help power the data center itself. Because Fermi is trying to build its own grid. So it can be like the largest and the coolest and the first of its kind, whatever, just really showboaty. But for 11 gigawatts of power, it's going to need a lot of assistance to do that. So of the 93 generators, they released how many different toxins and pollutants they were going to release into the air, proposally, per year, per ton. And we had an opportunity to call our Texas representative. Caroline Fairley is ours that's over this area. So we asked for her to request from the TCEQ to hold a public meeting so that we could go before the TCEQ and ask questions about the amount of pollution that was allowed and what we could do to safeguard our peoples. This is really the only opportunity that we've had so far to interfere. Before we found out about this, they had already requested permits and been approved for the stormwater access, but that's as far as they've gotten with permits so far. But we did have a lawyer present that represented some of the folks that lived across the street from the site. And they requested that this hearing be contested on their behalf as an affected party, affected from all the pollution, from everything that's going to be going on just right across the street. If they're granted that case, it will be presented before an administrative law judge at the Texas State Office of the Administrative Hearings, which is like an evidence-based hearing. There's like no jury. And this would be all played out over 6 months in which the data center would not be able to make any more construction during the time that that's being checked out, basically to see if it's like valid that they are an affected party and how so, and what are the ways that we can work around it. They'll have that. I mean, of course, if this is granted, and then they'll give that evidence back to the commissioners again, and the commissioners will come back and see if Um, they want to make a decision on the permit based on that information. Our city of Amarillo officials only have rights with Fermi over um, water because they had previously purchased the water rights for like 300 years. So for some of that water, Fermi had to request to purchase water from the city for their plant. Starting out in October, they received a 4-to-1 yes vote to sell 2.5 million gallons per day to Fermi America. Next year, they're going to come back and request for 5 million gallons per day. And by 2027, they're going to request for 10 million gallons per day. All of this was held behind closed door meetings before it was ever presented to the public, before the public was ever let to know that this was something that was going on in our community. And yeah, they pretty much just decided on their own that selling it for 2 times the rate was worth us not having the water left in our Ogallala for our agriculture, for our drinking water and things like that, just for this. The Carson County Commissioner's Court is the higher being over the land and the abatement part of things because that's where it's located property wise. So in Panhandle, Texas, we had to go to a couple of meetings and speak out against Fermi and what they're trying to do. Their most recent meeting was October 27th, where they went ahead and approved the tax abatements for Fermi because obviously as a billion-dollar company, the thing you definitely need are more tax breaks so that you can be successful. So that is where we are, and that's what that's where we're waiting around at.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much, Kendra.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kendra. I'm really impressed by the level of like research that you all have done as well. Like, because all you notice how complicated they make this, right? Not only are they hiding it, but they're also making it so bureaucratic that it's like so the fact that you're able to sort of pull apart that is really impressive.
Thank you. I have no hair.
Okay, so we're gonna we're gonna turn to Esperanza now. So Esperanza, of the seven hyperscale campuses of Project Stargate, four of them are in the Southwest, right? So we have Project Ludicrous, again, real name, in Abilene, Texas, which was the first one to be built, right? And I believe they're using gas turbines as well in that one. And there's at least three other projects in the Southwest, two more in Texas, and one in New Mexico, which is where you live. So Project Jupiter in New Mexico is in an area that's already dealt with poisons and arsenic in the water. And New Mexico is already projected to have water shortfalls in the future. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, I know that Yucca, the organization that you work at, has been challenging the oil and gas industry there, particularly because they've been trying to reverse environmental justice wins that organizers have fought for. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about this historical fight against oil and gas and how that's connected to resistance against data centers.
Sure. Hi, it's really good to be in space with you, Vivek and Kendra, and thank you for the work that you all do. And also thanks for the invitation to be here. Um, yeah, I first started my position at Yucca as the policy and climate and environmental justice policy campaign manager at the exact same time that this issue became public to my community in Doña Ana County. And so it kind of felt like a no-brainer given Yucca's work fighting fossil fuel expansion in New Mexico to join this fight. And also one of our foundational principles is this idea of free, prior, and informed consent, which is specifically for Indigenous people, but I think applies to any community that's facing extractive extraction. And yeah, I think it aligns with our idea of what the right to self-determination in New Mexico. And so yeah, I think that the troubling thing about this project from the start was that there was really no like public information. Like the developers hosted these public meetings, like community meetings, which were really just like propaganda events. I attended a majority of them, and asked a question regarding water use and was like met by technocrats that were just like, don't worry about it, essentially. And that I specifically asked about, again, it's a similar situation to Vivek about this like closed loop system that is just like a way to assuage people's very legitimate concerns about our water in this region that's so scarce and precious to us. Santa Teresa has already been, like you mentioned, facing arsenic levels in their water, and that's a naturally occurring thing, but nothing has been really done to address that. And there was like a very interesting manipulation tactic by Borderplex and these developers to be like, well, we can fix your arsenic issue by letting us construct this data center in your region. Like, this is how you actually fix your water, by letting us give you millions of dollars to fix your water infrastructure, which is just like to me nonsensical in that like money being thrown at a problem does not address the fact that our communities were not there at the table to decide that this is how we want to address our issues, that this is the best course for addressing like the longevity of our water supply and aquifer health. And so yeah, that's kind of how I entered this struggle. And yeah, the county commission hearing, uh just to give some background, it was almost a unanimous vote in favor of $165 billion revenue bond. So again, this massive tax break for an already billion-dollar OpenAI company that we didn't even know that they were going to be the tenant at this moment in September when they were voting on this decision. So like the public is kind of just left in the dark. They, mocked up some public meetings, pushed it through, steamrolled it through our democratic local bodies, both the county commission that approved this $165 billion bond and the planning and zoning commission, which rezoned this rural area in Santa Teresa near the border to be a medium to heavy industrial use zone. And that meeting was also deeply troubling in that in relation to fossil fuel expansion, and that they kept presenting this development as like we can rezone this area because there's already solar panels in Santa Teresa around these parcels of land. And it's like these data centers are like fundamentally different than, renewable energy infrastructure for our communities. So why would you compare the two at all? And yeah, that was deeply troubling to see that argument be made. And again, these are being powered by fracked gas. They're using natural gas, and that's going to come from the Permian Basin in New Mexico. And yeah, as you mentioned, like we do operate under the framework of New Mexico being a land of sacrifice, of being a sacrifice zone, and that it has been for generations, and that this is kind of just the latest move in terms of trying to exploit our communities and advanced corporate extractive practices that don't benefit us long term. That we want renewable energy, we want safe drinking water, and this is completely contrary to those needs. And so I'm kind of rambling, but so yeah, I mentioned the IRB vote in September and then this zoning hearing in October. And kind of where we're at now is that they still have not, they're in the process of applying for air quality and water permits. And these air quality permits, again, are shrouded in secrecy, like they redact the information specifically on the turbines they're using. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of interesting. As far as like to me, something that's also like troubling is that water and energy are like inextricably linked. Like you can't separate the two. And they are trying to like play this balancing act of like, well, don't worry about the water. We'll use this closed loop system, but it's like, but we're gonna pump your air full of, toxins and carcinogens and power this in a very energy intensive way. So yeah, the another interesting thing here was HB 93, which was passed earlier in the year. So they've been planning this for since the beginning of this year in our legislative session in New Mexico. And they passed basically this approval of something called microgrids, which is what the data center is going to be using to supply power. And first, they're building two microgrids, or they want to. So, like, why even call it a microgrid if you're building multiple? Like, that's silly. And yeah, the intention of this HB 93 was to power hospitals and like allow like smaller grids to plug into the public power. And that was also kind of happened in a shady way and behind closed doors, where lawmakers weren't fully in the know as to like what the ultimate like they found a loophole really in order to power this data center earlier in the year. And our communities were not at all informed as to like the consequences of HB 93 or like why these fossil fuel executives were so eager about these microgrids. So yeah, I'm kind of getting lost in your question, but that's a little bit of my
That's
perspective
great.
on Project Jupiter from a fossil fuel standpoint.
Thank you, Esperanza. Yeah, and I think you've raised a lot of issues that I think, other folks are talking about, which is all the different ways in which these developers and the corporations are using greenwashing or other forms of myth making to justify what is at its core an extraction project.
Thank you so much, everyone. The chat box in the chat is hot with lots of questions and comments and thoughts. So before we get to our, final question with you all, is it okay if we turn to the chat and raise some questions that folks are raising? All right. So let's see.
So many great questions.
Yeah, give us 1 second, y'all.
Um, well, someone asked about this issue with labor unions. Or do any of you have any sort of advice on how you work with labor unions that are like proposing that these facilities be built because of these short-term construction jobs that the developers are and the corporations are promising? Has that happened for any of y'all? Have you come across that?
That's been like one truly heartbreaking part um of this whole campaign is like I've been a union member, I've helped to organize a union, and like it changed my life, you know. So I think everyone should be represented by a union. And to hear, so when folks come and talk about like how they want a construction job that's closer to home so they don't have to drive 2 hours, that makes total sense to me. And I want them to have jobs closer to home too. I want them to have jobs that enable them to support their families. And I want their kids and all of our kids to be able to grow up in an environment where they grow up and they get to decide for themselves whether they stay or go, not have that decision made for them because all the water is gone. And I think, I don't have a good answer for this, but that's been one really just difficult part of this because, they should have jobs. They deserve jobs.
That's a great response. Way back in the day, I used to be a labor organizer too. So it really is disheartening to see there be such a split around jobs, knowing that these promises around job creation don't truly ever really materialize. Um, so just a reminder, y'all, our participants, please use the Q&A box for your questions. If you use the chat, it'll get lost. And if you send it to just us, host and panelists, it get super lost. So please use the chat box, select everybody, or use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I see a really great organizing question that I'm going to try and find. Oh, from Kenny, what have been your successes and challenges when mobilizing people to fight these issues, especially because these struggles appear to be prolonged? I mean, each of you have kind of talked about different agencies, counties, city councils, whatnot. How do you keep people engaged? And when do you decide to call people to an action?
Um, this is something that we've been struggling with, honestly, in southern New Mexico, and that I think that both the commissioners and developers have like taken a divide and conquer tactic, and that they're pumping money into certain uh one paid ads on to gain public support of their decision to spend or to give this $165 billion tax break. And they've also given large amounts of donations to like a food pantry in our community. And so that's deeply troubling. We've also just like had a hard time like coalescing people in the region. But this is something we're working on, I guess, trying to regroup everyone since this last major vote and really challenge these air quality permits is my hope is that we can get like not only down here local base building, but also just statewide, like, hey, this isn't the direction New Mexico wants to go in is really my hope. Yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Kendra.
So we were really lucky well, I guess lucky, unlucky, that our local government has had a really strong history of going behind the scenes and making decisions or going against what a city might vote for or against. So it's already kind of started to build a lack of transparency awareness. Like we know that our government's acting in a certain type of way, and we're trying to keep up with that. So there's already a lot of folks paying attention. So whenever this data center came to announcement, everyone was like, okay, we're kind of curious about it. And then we found out about all the closed door meetings, all the behind the scenes meetings, all the things that make us think like, oh no, this is just another thing where you guys are making your money and not sharing any of the prevention, the protections, the money, the revenues with this city so that we can grow or survive, actually. So our coalition kind of is birthed from that, from what's already there, and we're just coming together. So it's not even just people that are really typically on the left or the right sides. This is all people that are just still really hungry for transparency and representation. So we have been lucky to build off of that.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to ask another question. This one is for all of the panelists, and this is someone wanting advice for a
Mhm.
community that's starting close to just step one with a more recent proposal. How would you recommend starting up this organizing?
Given what you know now.
Mhm.
I would say like track, like I wish someone had told me about the planning and zoning hearing. I
Mhm.
found out about that hearing the night before. One, because in the public like comment or the public announcement that they were gonna have that hearing, it was just like a data center in Santa Teresa, not like, the largest one that we just voted on. I don't know. So it's like, yeah, using those keywords, to make sure that your people are informed about these public meetings so that you can just continue to have this massive public outcry. And they will try to stop you. Like in the first IRB vote in Doña Ana County, they made up a rule the night before that you cannot bring signs in to protests. And I think that was directly because in Tucson, you guys had such a massive visual opposition to this. And I genuinely think that's why they banned it in Doña Ana County. And also break those rules. Like, don't like peacefully break those rules and express your opposition to data centers in your community.
Any other thoughts for that, Kendra? And then we'll go to the last question.
Yeah, just echoing Esperanza, go, intervene as early as possible as soon as you find out about it. If you didn't find out about it earlier, that's not your fault. That's as intended. And yeah, I think the those propaganda sessions were wild. The first one we went to, like our whole experience of this was body by body, government body by body, just looking at one narrow little segment of this. We're just looking at the zoning. We're just looking at the land sale. We're just looking at the water use. We're just looking at whether or not this protects ratepayers. There's no one holding the whole for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? The only people holding the whole are the corporations that come in. They have their plan already.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really jarring that I think and I'm struggling to answer this question also because it was so long ago. It was like 6 months ago, and so much has happened since then. But I would say just like what we learned in those propaganda sessions was do not accept the terms of the conversation that they present, because they will only present one side. They will only have the proponents and the developers at the table. So, get loud, get angry. It's fine. You're defending the land, you're defending the water, you're defending your community. That's what you're doing. And so if you can do that yourself, great. If you need to lean on other people in your community to get loud, that's fine too. Everyone has what they can do, and the more people you can find to join, the better it gets.
Kendra, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, I think I think I would just add, like you guys have already talked about, your community building and how important that is, and figuring out what each body of government does and where you have space to make changes on your behalf. I would also like, just to hit on the propaganda part, like you also can use propaganda, but in a really positive way. So making sure that you're correcting the terms, like it's inevitable, it's going to happen. It's not inevitable. And it just seems scary because that's their only play in the playbook, is to be scary and loud and throw money at you. So people power over everything. So
That's
yeah.
right. Speaking of inevitability, our final question to you all is, we talk to local organizers and activists quite often about their experience organizing against these proposals. We know that it can feel very overwhelming. We hear narratives all the time about the AI race. It feels inevitable. I'm just curious, last thoughts. What keeps you going in this fight? What keeps you inspired?
I'm happy to jump in on that. I personally am having a really great time being annoying to these data centers and the rich people that are getting to make all of these decisions on our behalf. My friend group and I, Chase is actually sitting with me right here. We've spent a whole lot of time over this year, like trying to combine mutual aid with just community services and getting people involved. And in the midst of doing all that craziness, we're now being challenged with this bigger overshadowing kind of existential threat to even just our climate and to our existence. So when it felt like that was like a really good opportunity to just hang our hats up and say, like, okay, you got us, we're done. This actually gave us more power to connect with the people that we were already working for, working with, working around, and build our coalition up stronger, and to split up the work that we're doing. So yeah, we just want to be as annoying as possible and keep fighting, because if we break this, we're gonna have the solutions to break all the other things. Just know it.
Thank you, Kendra. Esperanza, do you have any thoughts about what keeps you going?
I just love, I was born here. I was born and raised in the Chihuahuan Desert, and I love the Chihuahuan Desert. And like, yeah, that keeps me going for sure. Is I'm like getting emotional, honestly, just thinking about it. Like this desert means so much to me. Yeah.
I understand. We really understand. Thank you for that, Vivek.
Me too. Um, Community and love. I mean, we have folks who open up their homes, we have artists who just like give their work. And it's gotten to the point where there are enough of us who understand that like we can't just keep fighting and saying no to everything. And we're organizing to be proactive. We have our coalition has different working groups, and one of them is an economic development working group. We want to imagine together like what smaller, more numerous projects can look like that actually benefit community members that, maybe even we can buy into, right? At a smaller scale and expect some kind of return on investment. Like, what would it look like for the city or county to facilitate something like that that ends food deserts in our communities? Like, what would these like projects look like? And really just coming together and imagining what a better community can look like without these massive outside extractive corporations that come through and just take and take and take just to facilitate this huge transfer and redistribution of wealth to the top that we're seeing right now, and it's all in the service of cruelty.
Really appreciate you all so much. Thank you, each of you, for the work that you do, for the work that your community is doing. We are in this together, and I love Kendra. Yes, people power, always. So, really appreciate you all. Please make sure to follow them if you can on social media. Support from wherever you are. If you're in Spain, if you're in Tucson, wherever, we're dropping some links in the chat so you can keep up with that. And I think we're gonna close now, right?
Yeah, yeah, don't leave yet, y'all.
No.
Don't leave yet. We have 8 minutes to tell you really exciting stuff. In a few weeks, on January 23rd to the 25th, we are going to be hosting a regional training in Tucson on data centers. Folks, this is for organizers in the Southwest. But if you're coming, across the West Coast, you're more than welcome to join us. On your screen is the interest form. Please fill it out. We will reach out to you to share more information and figure out a way for you to get there with us in Tucson. These trainings are really fun, educational, and you'll get even more information and opportunities to really strategize with folks in the region on how to fight back. So please take a moment, take a look at the form if you're interested, fill it out. We will get back to you very shortly. And we also have created a fact sheet um, based on all of the materials and stuff that we talked about today. That will also be dropped into the chat. But still, don't leave just yet. We have a really, really big announcement
Yes,
brought
drum
to you by
roll.
Teresa. Drum
Woo!
roll.
So yeah, we're revealing. Oh, there it is. Woo! We've been keeping this a secret. We're actually going to be hosting our third Take Back Tech this coming up in April 17th through the 19th in Atlanta, Georgia. For those who went to Take Back Tech number two or number one, we were in Chicago 2 years ago, and we've chosen Atlanta, and we've chosen this moment because we know it's the moment to come together and really build a stronger movement together. So I hope that folks can make it there. Be following us on social media, sign up for our email list. All of that stuff will get you the official announcement, but you got first dibs in terms of hearing about it. So this week we're gonna be dropping all the information.
Get on our email list, Blue Sky, social media for more information about Take Back Tech. If you don't believe us that it's really the best event ever, check out the chat. The excitement is all the proof you need. One more thing. We also just launched a new multi-part series with Nonprofit Quarterly called Digital Colonialism that explores how data center expansion is reshaping communities across the country and tells the stories of how communities are resisting. I did author the first one, which is out now. I outlined how media justice is partnering with communities to push back against data centers, and how we got to this current moment of this rapid expansion. So those links will also be in the chat.
Yeah, and if you want to stay updated, as we said, on events, you can sign up for our newsletter. We're going to pull up, the next slide is going to show you a QR code. And if you point your camera to that and scan it, you should be taken to a link to subscribe to our email list. And we also have, obviously, there are all of our socials if you want to follow us there. And then the last thing, for those of you who are still with us, thank you so much. We just want you to fill out a quick survey that just to tell us a little bit about what you thought about this webinar today, and also if you are interested in staying involved with it.
Yes, your feedback is really helpful. We do look at it and we do make changes to get better and better. So thank you so much for your time this evening and for filling out the form. We hope to see you next time.
And a
Okay.
big thank you to all of our panelists again.
Thank you all for hosting this. It's amazing.